Leonidas Donskis, there is an air of pessimism among the diplomats, among a lot of your colleagues in the parliament. Nobody expects a glorious summit in Vilnius. What went wrong? Why Ukraine is seen still as an area of influence of Russia? And why so many think that they won't dare to sign the agreement with the European Union?
I'm still keeping my fingers crossed, and I still believe that a miracle may happen, that the pressure that the Ukrainian people may put on its political elite, on President Yanukovych, may work. But in any case, whatever happens, some things are quite obvious. And for instance, what is absolutely unquestionable is lack of consistency and ambition on the EU side.
What do you mean lack of ambition? Because was it enough or not enough, this agreement, right from the start, from the times of Orange Revolution?
I would say by reiterating Slavoj Žižek when he was asked about the American role in some measures against Milosevic and bombing. And Slavoj Žižek said too little and too late. So that's how I would react to our policies. Too little and too late. We should have been more proactive a long time before. And there was ample time when East Central European countries reacted, clearly understanding that Ukraine would make a difference. Ukraine is a large, ambitious, talented country with great, almost immense role in Europe in terms of its ability to link Eastern and Central Europe, or to be very important as a bridge between Russia and the EU. And that's why our complacency and our reliance on God knows what. So it led to a very strange interplay of some factors that led, I would say, to a very difficult describable outcome. Now we can rely on a miracle. Why should have been waiting for such a long time to fall victims, to fall prey of some sort of, blind details or blind fate? We should have been more proactive. We should have been something. We should have been doing something for the benefit of Ukraine, because I can tell you what. The Baltic states, no matter how far away they were from the rest of the Soviet Union in terms of their independence, in terms of their craving for the return to Europe, so they would never ever have made part of Europe without very strong and proactive policies of the United States and the EU. That's why even the first breakaway republic, my country, Lithuania, would not have been able to make it if not very clear and strong signals. I think Ukraine lacked those signals.
Do you think it's just and fair that Turkey is a candidate country and Ukraine not?
I think that Turkey is a special case because Turkey is a NATO country. It's crucially important for the United States, for Israel, and for the region. And Ukraine can hardly compare to Turkey in terms of geopolitical importance in the region. But Ukraine is pivotally important for Europe, for the middle of Europe, for the center of the continent. And that's why I think of course it's not fair. It's not fair that Germany, France, or other major crucial players of the EU paid so little attention to Ukraine. Of course, it's quite comical that some small countries like Lithuania is doing their utmost, trying to do almost impossible. So Lithuania is trying to pursue the mission impossible, having its presidency in the EU.
So how you feel as Lithuanian? Is it frustrating experience? Why the summit was undertaken then? Why not to skip it at all? Because it was such a huge expectation and such a massive failure. At least it feels like that now.
We have to wait. We have to still await the very final details and what is going to happen in the Verkhovna Rada, what is going to happen in Ukraine. So still, I would like to wait until the very last moment to be absolutely certain about some details. But the Vilnius Summit was not a failure in terms of the message that Lithuania sent to the EU, that it's a priority. The country which has its president is set a priority, that Ukraine has to be on board, that Ukraine is pivotally important. Whether or not Lithuania could have been successful, it depended on many, many things. And first and foremost on synergy, on the political will, on the ambition of the EU to speak one voice. And I think it would have been quite unfair, not to say illogical, to expect the Baltic region or Poland, even Poland, to be sufficient to pursue such a goal with no strong assistance from Germany, France, or Southern Europe. So that's why I would say that this is especially obvious when it comes to Ukraine as a common as a common and I would say our joint dedication. It should have been so. In the meantime, what is obvious is that each time when a big country comes to the EU, we have no policy. It was very convenient to deal with small countries of Central Europe. It was very convenient and easy to deal with countries that were not that big and that important as Ukraine. We are not prepared to accommodate a big country. We are not prepared to accommodate a big and a very important country. And I'm just afraid to say that each time when I was confined to very strange discussions with my colleagues concerning the importance or relevance of Ukraine, I organized the Ukraine Day. That was the only event of this kind in the European Parliament. I organized them, and the question was that why should I have been questioning myself or justifying myself for doing this? This is precisely because we didn't have any clear and strategically thought and reflected policies on the EU, and that's why on Ukraine. Sorry, and that's the reason why I guess we started playing a very strange game. On the one side, taking Yulia Tymoshenko as the very center of the whole matter.
Do you think it's not fair?
I think it's very strange because the country cannot become hostage of one politician, no matter how unjust is the system, no matter how much selective justice is in Ukraine. But we cannot make Yulia Tymoshenko, who is very far from angel, at the center of the whole matter, making the Ukrainian people a hostage.
I think there is no real strategy. It's a failure of strategy that there is. We talk a lot about Eastern Partnership and neighborhood policies, but behind it, is there a real strategic policy or not?
I don't think so. Honestly, the Eastern Partnership is a compromise undertaken by Germany. It's a compromise. After the war in Georgia, after the war between Georgia and Russia, something should have been done. Something must have been done. And that's why Eastern Partnership was a kind of compensation. Something that, it's better than nothing, so to say. But in fact, Ukraine simply exposes our impotence. It exposes our inability to speak one voice and to have a clear strategic vision for the future. Because how can we confine ourselves to the question whether or not Rada is going to release Tymoshenko to Germany? Is it fair and logical of us to wait until Yanukovych comes back to his senses or gets back to his common sense and sound reason, thinking about the future of his nation? These are all, I would say, calculations, political calculations. But if we had been more consistent, more logical, more ambitious, we should have had this constellation clearer, more certain, and that's why we wouldn't become so dependent on the interplay of absolutely secondary details and secondary things.
Do you think that offering a free visa regime to Russians would soften its politics towards agreement of or rapprochement of Ukraine to European Union? Because the observers who say, well, everybody's offered something but Russians. So would you think that real integration of Russia into European Union would change the rules of the game?
I don't know whether there is any symmetry or any kind of logical relationship between these two cases. I realize that we cannot speak with Russia the language of manifestos or ultimatums. Of course, Russia has its sense of dignity, and we cannot perform a kind of civilizing mission all the time requiring something and not giving anything to Russia. But at the same time, I don't know whether we can talk about any kind of established relationship between these two cases. What I know for sure is that, of course, Ukraine is pivotally important for Russia in terms of its identity. Ukraine is a big country. Russia can hardly imagine herself without Ukraine, which is the cradle of Russian civilization, which is the significant other of Russia, so to say. And I think that what is important is political symbolism. No matter how Ukraine would be craving for Europe, or no matter how divided it would be on this issue, the point is that Russia needs Ukraine more than Ukraine needs Russia. It's absolutely obvious because Russia was able to come to terms with the loss of the Baltic states. It would be able to come to terms almost in a very painful fashion, I guess, with the loss of some Caucasian republics, but not Ukraine. Ukraine is pivotally important. As Brzezinski told us more than once, there cannot be any kind of Russian empire without Ukraine. It's a historical constellation. It's always been that way. On the other side, I guess, well, after the After the collapse of the Soviet Union, I think Russia became very sensitive. As a successor state, it became very sensitive to any kind of geopolitical maneuvering. And that's why after Ukraine, I think they imagined that Russia would find herself confined to China, to Asian countries, and Ukraine disappears, and this means the dramatic change of Russian geopolitical party and geopolitical constellation. I don't know whether or not this is the calculation, but this is how money and power speaks. And the money and power speaks in such a way that Russia can ruin Ukrainian economy. And if the EU was unable to foresee this and to have this picture, so then it means that we were naive and we were just unable to predict many things that were more than obvious.
There are many people who are also looking with aspiration to Europe in Russia. There are many Russians living in the European Union. It's most probably the biggest diaspora of all. So why there is no plan to integrate Russia? Why there is no place for Russia and those European aspirations of Russians? Because as you know, there have been always two parties in Russia, one pro-European and the other very nationalistic. So where's this policy of Russian integration into European Union?
I'm just afraid that everything what is happening here after 1990, I guess, is just a sort of, our hangover. It's just a political hangover of Europe. Because after the fall of the Berlin Wall and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we were tempted to believe that the game was over. We were tempted to believe that we won the game, the Cold War was over, and we forgot that the world has changed considerably. We were totally unprepared for this new page of history. And I think that we're paying the price. Russia is not that same kind of Russia it was under Yeltsin. It is not the Soviet Union, of course. But again, under Putin, it's quite complicated. It's a very difficult ball game. And whereas we have a hostile Russian political elite, we have many millions of wonderful Europeans in Russia. Many wonderful, I'm not saying anything about the superb and absolutely magnificent Russian culture, which is an absolutely inescapable part of European culture. But at the same time, we have many Europeans in Russia, and I think that this is just our lack of vision, lack of strategy, our myopia, our short-sightedness, that we never developed any kind of strategy vis-a-vis Russia. Russia should have been more European, and we should have sent many, many more signals to Russia. And if we had done this, it would have been much more difficult for Putin and the Kremlin to manipulate people in Russia.
Thank you very much, Leonidas Donskis.
Thank you.